On the surface, my life looked perfect. Family photos, polished smiles, and rehearsed conversations. Yet beneath the surface, I carried the crushing burden of lies that ate away at me daily. Silence became my shield, but also my cage. The breaking point came when honesty was no longer optional, when the mask collapsed and my truth spilled into the open. What followed was an earthquake of guilt, therapy sessions that cracked me open, and the painstaking work of rebuilding trust with others and myself. This is the story of how lies collapse, but truth can still heal. On the outside, my life appeared polished, enviable even. The framed photos on my walls, the laughter at family gatherings, and the stories I told friends all painted a picture of someone who had everything in order. But beneath that surface was a current I could no longer ignore, a restless energy that left me feeling like an imposter in my own skin. Nights were the hardest. I'd wake up from dreams that weren't really dreams at all, but distortions of memories I tried so hard to bury. Faces blurred into shadows, voices echoed half-truths, and I would jolt awake with the sense that my carefully stacked reality was about to crumble. Even during the day, a strange burden followed me. Smiles felt forced, conversations rehearsed. It was as though every gesture was a performance, and the world was my stage. I became skilled at avoidance. I dodged conversations that might wander too close to honesty, redirected questions, and even laughed off suspicions when someone noticed cracks in my story. Each fabrication I told was small, but together they formed a fragile house of cards. And with each passing year, I sensed the tower leaning, ready to fall apart with the slightest touch. The breaking point arrived in a way I couldn't control. A routine conversation spiraled when someone innocently asked about a detail from my past. My throat tightened, my palms sweated, and my practiced responses failed me. In that moment, I realized how exhausting it had become to keep dodging, pretending, and building walls around myself. The facade that I'd worn for so long wasn't just slipping, it was suffocating me. For the first time, I admitted silently to myself, I can't keep living this way. The load of quiet is heavier than words. For years, I had hidden behind smiles and polite conversations, pretending my past choices didn't claw at me each night. I convinced myself that if I just worked harder, achieved more, and built enough layers of success, the reality would stay buried. But when a new chapter opened, a career opportunity that demanded complete faith and background checks, I realized the disguise would not hold much longer. At first, I rehearsed excuses. Maybe I could frame the deception as a misunderstanding, cover it with vague language, or soften its edges with half-truths. But every version shattered under its own weakness. Counseling had already started peeling away my justifications, forcing me to confront the futility of avoidance. My counselor's words echoed in my head like a warning bell. Authenticity won't destroy you, hiding will. The confrontation wasn't something I scheduled or even fully prepared for. It arrived on an ordinary rainy evening with thunder humming in the distance and a stillness in the air. Sitting across from the one person who deserved integrity, I felt my hands tremble, my pulse quicken, my throat tighten until speaking felt impossible. Yet the hush between us grew unbearable, pressing on me until I could no longer retreat. At last, I spoke the words I had buried for years, words that stripped away the carefully constructed version of myself. Their expression shifted instantly, first disbelief, then wounded muteness, and finally something harder to face, betrayal. It felt like I had broken glass that could never be put back together. But inside me, a strange release surged. Even through the fear, I sensed a door had cracked open, a passage toward freedom I had never dared to push before. And though the cost was high, I understood candor had to breathe, even if it left scars behind. When the words finally left my mouth, it was as if a tremor split the room. Nothing looked different, yet everything had shifted. The void that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed with unspoken questions, disappointment, and the crackling tension of broken confidence. My chest ached, and for a moment, I wondered if openness had been a mistake. The first days afterwards were brutal. I cycled through emotions in waves. Shame so sharp it hollowed me out, anger at myself for waiting this long, fear that relationships I cherished might never recover. Nights stretched endlessly, replaying every detail of the conversation in my mind, while mornings brought the dull ache of knowing nothing could return to how it was before. Healing sessions became my lifeline. My counselor guided me through the storm, using tools like CBT to challenge destructive thought spirals and EMDR sessions to unearth memories I had buried too deep. For the first time, I began to understand that the falsehood hadn't just deceived others, it had trapped me in a prison of my own making. Facing that fact was terrifying, but it was also the only path toward release. Meanwhile, assurance fractured like glass. People closest to me struggled between anger and confusion. Some withdrew, giving me space, while others confronted me directly, demanding answers I barely knew how to give. Restoring felt impossible, yet I kept showing up, offering what little honesty I had, one piece at a time. Unexpectedly, not all reactions were condemnation. A few people expressed quiet respect, not for what I had done, but for finally choosing integrity over disguise. That small glimpse of grace reminded me why I had taken this leap. The convulsion had shaken every foundation I'd leaned on. But as the dust settled, I realized destruction also clears ground for renewal. After the upheaval of honesty, the aftermath forced me into reflection I had avoided for years. I couldn't reconstruct on the same shaky ground that had once carried my fabrications. Psychological support sessions became more than crisis management. They became an excavation of my past. Through patient questioning, I began to unearth root causes: childhood fears of abandonment, the desperate need to be liked, and the belief that candor would make me unlovable. Recognizing these thought patterns was painful, but without that clarity, no healing could begin. With time, I took concrete steps to repair what I had broken. Apologies weren't rehearsed speeches, they were raw admissions, often stumbling, sometimes met with muteness. I promised openness, even when it was uncomfortable, and I backed it with action. For friends who had lost credibility in me, I shared progress openly, session notes, reflections, even small daily check-ins. Accountability became my anchor, ensuring words and actions finally aligned. Amends weren't only verbal. I offered help, time, and effort, whatever small acts could demonstrate sincerity. Slowly, some walls softened. Not everyone forgave, and I had to accept that. Counseling reminded me that mending isn't about forcing others to stay. It's about becoming trustworthy enough that if they choose to, they can. Perhaps the hardest part was forgiving myself. Shame lingered like a shadow, whispering that I didn't deserve a second chance. But my counselor guided me toward radical self-compassion, understanding that mistakes, though devastating, do not define the entirety of a person. I began practicing vulnerability, admitting my flaws without shame, and gradually the pressure of remorse loosened. Restoration wasn't about reclaiming who I was. It was about constructing someone stronger, more authentic, and willing to live without veils. When the dust of confession and renewal began to settle, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The old path, the one paved with deceptions, fear, and avoidance, was gone. What lay ahead was uncharted, but for the first time in years, I wanted to walk it without pretending to be someone else. My priorities shifted in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. Late nights once wasted on anxiety spirals turned into journaling sessions, where I wrote candid reflections I no longer needed to hide. Conversations with friends stopped being performances. I no longer measured each word, but allowed openness and sincerity to shape the dialogue. Even in my career, I felt a renewed sense of clarity, choosing projects that aligned with my integrity, rather than chasing validation. The benefits surprised me. By facing the past, I discovered relationships that grew deeper instead of crumbling. Some people left, but those who stayed seemed to respect me more for admitting my flaws. Opportunities arrived too. New collaborations, invitations, and friendships that blossomed because I finally carried authenticity instead of pretense. Restorative work remained central in shaping this new life. From EMDR sessions that helped soften the grip of old memories to CBT tools that rewired destructive thought patterns, I had practical methods for handling challenges without slipping into old habits. The liberation I felt wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like air filling lungs after years of shallow breaths. I no longer feared the gravity of my story. I carried it openly, letting it remind me of where I'd been and how far I had come. And if my journey carries any lesson for others, it's this: authenticity is worth every rupture, every loss, every scar. Honesty doesn't just heal, it sets the course for a life you never thought you could deserve.